All right.
All right, we're all set for this. So right now, they can't hear us, but the mic is working.
Okay.
But the only thing they're seeing right now is just that page.
Okay. Is it okay that I tell them that you're joining me, or is that, do they even know who you are now?
Nope.
All right.
They knew who. All set for this. So right now, because the mic isn't on, turn this on. It's okay, I'll delete it. You didn't curse anything. Go. Perfect.
I guess what I'm asking is, how will I know what the questions are? Are you going to be saying them to me, or are you going to be...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second. Right now.
I'll just say that I'm joined by one of the producers of the course to help with the... Does that sound okay?
Give me 1 second. I need to make sure I'm muted.
I guess what I'm asking is, how will I know what the questions are? Are you going to be saying them to me, or are you going to be... Yeah.
Right now.
I'll just say that I'm joined by one of the...
I'll take some time to update. There we go. Your Wi-Fi, I think, is slow. No. My Wi-Fi is fine. There we go. Alright, I can hear. You want to say hello?
Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Robichaud, and thank you for joining the live stream as we talk a little bit about Black Panther today. You might have just seen her, but the producer of the show is joining us as well and is going to help me through our live stream today. So what I just wanted to do is spend about 5 or 10 minutes talking a little bit about some of the things that I find exciting and interesting about the movie, and then I'm going to invite you to send me some questions. I'm going to answer those as well. Obviously, I'm going to give a warning, which is sort of completely obvious given the nature of this live stream, which is, spoiler alert. We're going to be talking about Black Panther, and we're going to be talking about all the things that happened in the movie, or at least hitting on some of the highlights. I also want to mention, before I forget, because I'll likely forget by the end of this, that yesterday I had a great opportunity to talk with one of my colleagues, a wonderful historian, Leah Wright-Ragur, and we had her on my podcast. I don't know if some of you may know that I have a podcast that's mostly weekly called This Week in Dystopia, and we can send out the link to that. But the episode that went live today is a conversation between her and me talking about Black Panther. She's a huge comic book geek, as I am, obviously, and so we had a lot of great things to say. For myself, I can't tell you how thrilled I am that this movie exists, and just as importantly, that it has received the kind of attention that it has. It's a huge, major success. I think we were looking at the numbers earlier, and something like $700 million today globally, going strong. I think it's going to clearly pass $1 billion. The drop from the first week to the second week has been smaller than it is a lot of movies. This is a big hit, right? And it's another wake-up call, I think, to the general Hollywood community that, movies that don't just feature the same sort of characters can not only exist, but can thrive and be amazing as well. I've been a fan of Black Panther my whole life. I know that many of you probably have as well. If you haven't, though, by all means, jump into some of the comic books as well. And for some of you who may already know this, I highly recommend starting with the Ta-Nehisi Coates run. It's been going on for over a year now, including, you can collect like each of the 3 volumes in his One Nation Under Our Feet, I think is what it's called. On that note, Ta-Nehisi Coates, I think just today has announced that he's going to be writing Captain America, which is really, really exciting as well. So anyhow, Black Panther, where to begin? For me, and I'm just going to throw out a few initial thoughts and then, as I said, invite you to ask some questions. For me, beyond the sheer beauty of this movie, I mean, watching Wakanda unfold before our eyes, especially if you get to see this on an IMAX, I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. Besides the sheer beauty of this movie, I was just thrilled and impressed with its willingness, and the director's willingness to tackle some really deep and interesting issues. In social philosophy, in critical race theory, in just this question of identity as well. The movie didn't shy away from these things. It put them front and center, and it's given us a lot to think about. And to me, some of the best movies can be both completely entertaining, let's just have fun with it, let's just watch a superhero movie, but also have a lot to say. I think the movie clearly stands out in its importance for representation, but it also gives us, and this is where I really want to begin, it also gives us a really interesting question, which we've seen discussed in other comic book arenas before, which is, how does one address oppression and past wrongdoing and ongoing wrongdoing? So as I see the film, with the passing of T'Chaka and the rise of T'Challa as the Black Panther, T'Challa makes a decision that he wants to bring Wakanda out into the open. He wants to bring Wakanda out into the world. It has stayed hidden for so long, and his vision of this is to do so mostly peacefully. Right? Is to offer an inspirational an inspiration for the world. But that's not Killmonger's agenda. Killmonger also wants to bring Wakanda out into the world, but through conflict. Killmonger wants to address the racial injustices that have been going on for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and the horrors of colonialism. And so he wants to arm people. He wants to lead to rebellion. He wants to lead to conflict as a means of both promoting racial justice in the future and addressing past wrongdoing. This parallels, I think, not perfectly. It's not meant to be a perfect parallel. I don't know if it's meant to be a parallel at all, but it certainly parallels for me the back and forth that we've seen over decades between Magneto and Professor X. We all know that those characters were brought on not initially, but certainly early on. They were used to discuss in the '60s the difference between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and Magneto ends up being, for more violent resistance, and of course Professor X articulates a position where it's more peaceful. And I see this same sort of conflict between the Black Panther and Killmonger, which is why I'm really sad that they decided to kill Killmonger at the end of the movie. We all who have seen it love his closing line. I'd rather be dead. Put my body into the ocean next to the slaves who jumped off the boat rather than be enslaved. But at the same time, Killmonger's just too rich of a character to die. So I'm hoping that Marvel Cinema does what it has often done in the comic books, and that's bring him back in some way or another. This conflict, this antagonism between Black Panther and Killmonger. Obviously, it's in the comic books, but it's just really interesting because we can see, at least I can see, the perspective of both of these positions, and so I don't want it to end, and so that's one of the things that I walked away from the movie. I loved it, but I also felt that I wanted more of this, or at least the promise of more of this going forward, and so I sure hope that we get an opportunity to see more of it going on. Another thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is just file under all the work that you've been doing in my philosophy course, is it's so interesting to me, the character of Black Panther, because he stands in opposition, not uniquely, there's always other examples, but certainly most prominently, he stands in opposition to the typical superhero who finds themselves working against political authority and legitimacy, right? They're wearing a mask, they're swinging around the city, they've got these superpowers, and the law and order has to figure out what to do with them. We talk about this, the classic Spider-Man, J. Jonah Jameson is like, waving his fist, Spider-Man, unmask this guy, how can we hold him accountable for anything? Or that's usually the norm. Superman, of course, is Superman, and it ends up working with the United States government in a different capacity. But what's so interesting to me and amazing about Black Panther is him being king and him having these superpowers are wound up very tightly together. And so there's no question of his legitimacy insofar as he is king and he gets these powers accordingly. And so I just throw that out there as something to think about, is that the different notions of the way that superheroes work for and against political legitimacy. Black Panther is an example of someone who has his political legitimacy and his superhero-dom tied very closely together. On that note, I do, as I mentioned before, I do really recommend the Ta-Nehisi Coates run for the first 12 issues or so, because one of the things it explores, and I think this movie touches upon this a little bit, but it doesn't get entirely into this. One of the things that the movie, that the series explores is the fact that Wakanda still is a monarchy, and whether a monarchy is the right way to organize things. And so there's real pushback on Black Panther's rule in that run on Ta-Nehisi Coates, and it raises a lot of really interesting questions. And so I don't expect the film to explore all of that in one movie. If anything, I wanted them. I heard recently that there's something like a 4-hour cut of Black Panther, and I was like, yes, I hope it's 5 hours. I'm happy in this world. I'd love it to be the length of a Netflix series. But all the same, there's certainly more to be said about this notion of whether a monarchy is the right way to go, even if it is a benevolent ruler like T'Challa. You see within the Black Panther movie what can happen very quickly when the benevolent ruler is displaced. Things can go south, at least according to some people, pretty quickly. And so anyways, I recommend that as food for thought. Last ideas before we break into some Q&A. Besides talking about the Black Panther and about him being a superhero and being a king. Another thing that I want to talk about is the wonderful representation of Shuri in this film. She is definitely one of the breakout characters. I brought Show and Tell. I have my Shuri action figure here. I'm trying to see if I can get it without the reflection going on. So I hope everyone gets one of these. I bought that whole line, and we'll be putting it on the show. You can already see the insanity behind me. I know you've seen the videos. I'm going to be putting that up above. I love this character, and I'm very excited to see how she does interact with the rest of the Avengers and in the Marvel universe that's growing. I would, I'm the kind of person that would love nothing more than to see her sitting down with Bruce Banner and with Tony Stark and all three of them going on and on and on about geeking out totally about science and technology and all the rest of it. She not only would obviously hold her own, she'd probably be smarter than both of them to boot. So I'm thrilled that this character has been brought into things as she has, and I'm very much looking forward. Towards the end of the movie, it's very much promised that she's going to be a central character going forward. I think I'm going to start wrapping up what I want to say, because I really just wanted to get this conversation going, and then offer myself here for questions. So there's tons to say, and one of the things that I want to mention is I think that there's a tremendous amount of interesting reflection that's coming out of this movie in terms of race and race relations and the connection between African Americans and Africans, and I'm not going to presume to be an expert on any of that, but I strongly recommend you just sniffing around a little bit on some of these wonderful articles that are coming out. They are well worth your time. There are people that are very positive about the movie. There are people who think that it falls short in some significant ways. In the spirit of of presenting all ideas, I think all of that's worth engaging and taking seriously. And as I said at the very beginning of this, for someone who's built this whole course on the premise that superhero narratives can be both fun and entertaining, but also really informative, you can learn a lot and you can think a lot about them. It really delights me that this movie is yet again showing how that can happen. We've been talking about this movie for a few weeks now, and I think we're going to be continuing talking about it for a while, and that's great. So let me start by answering some of these questions that I've gotten. So I have one from Mike that says, what are your thoughts on Killmonger's philosophy and his bury me in the ocean with my ancestors who jumped from the ships because they knew that death was better than bondage? I think one thing that I would want to say is, I definitely understand it. I mean, to me, this is Killmonger's moment of, there's a sort of existentialist moment here where Killmonger has been dealt a death blow. He could be saved, or he could choose to die. He gives us that quote, and he tries to, at least as I'm thinking on his behalf, he tries to show that even here he's in control, he's in charge, he's master of his own destiny, saying, "Look, I'd rather do this than be saved by you." What makes Killmonger to me an interesting character is that he is somewhat sympathetic. I want to be careful here because he's also brutal. He's brutal in particular towards women. So he's a villain. I mean, I don't think the movie pretends that he's not a villain. But like most interesting and complex villains, there's something there. There's something behind his thinking that's worth exploring and worth thinking about. And so I think I'm hedging a little bit here only because I'm going to use this question as an opportunity to say I miss more. Not only do I want Killmonger not to be dead, I wanted more of Killmonger in this movie. I felt that the beats that we saw with Killmonger were fairly rushed. We just went really quickly from he's this little boy, he's learning about Wakanda from his father. Boom! Suddenly he's an MIT graduate and member of a SEAL task force. Boom! Now he's in Wakanda taking over. Boom! Now he's being thrown off the throne. That's a huge arc for a 2 hour and 15 or 14 minute or whatever it is movie. So I want to know more about how Killmonger got to these points. Like, how did he go from the little boy who was learning about Wakanda from his father and seeing his father make a hard decision about what he thought was necessary to do in Oakland and presumably further, to the Killmonger who decides that he wants the throne, he wants it all, and he has a very clear plan on how he's going to move forward. So I guess what I want to see is how that process happened. This is just an invitation, and I was talking to Lee about this on the podcast. Please, Marvel, give us a Killmonger prelude to this movie. You know, show us that there's plenty of stuff here to show us how this character developed, and ideally, I imagine we could see someone who becomes, you know, committed to a project, but also somewhat poisoned along the way. And I mean, that makes the most interesting villains. It's what makes Magneto so interesting. You know, Magneto is a villain most of the time. I mean, his plans are monstrous when you look at them. But you understand where he's coming from, and half of what he says is not wrong in terms of the people's reaction to him. So, not a complete answer, but I hope it's a good start. This is from Pathfinder. Did Killmonger have an extremely good point? Was Killmonger the hero? So we're still on Killmonger. I love that we're still on Killmonger. I don't view Killmonger as the hero, as I've just said. But I view him as compelling, which are two different things, I suppose. And I think one of the things that made me so happy about this movie is we were given a compelling villain. I liked Thor Ragnarok. It was a ton of really entertaining. But Hela was just like, I'm here. I'm going to destroy everything. My dad didn't tell you the whole story. That's actually a little interesting, that part of it. But Marvel's most interesting moves here are when they give us characters villains, I think, that have a lot to them. And I think that in many ways, this has been a weakness of the Marvel movies, is that they give us these amazing heroes, and then they give us these villains that are only so-so. They're getting better at this. I thought, for instance, the Vulture in the Spider-Man movie was interesting. Michael Keaton's portrayal, that was really interesting. You could understand where this person was coming from. But it had been the case that, DC had done, at least in previous incarnation, a better job with. The Joker, for instance, was an extraordinarily compelling character in The Dark Knight. And now Marvel, I think, is catching up, and Killmonger is a great example where we point to this. So to me, is Killmonger the hero? No. To other people, could he be conceived as be? Yes. That's what makes this interesting. As I said, I just want more between him and T'Challa. I want to see this war of ideas, and the two of them fight it out further. So I have a question from Aaron on what I thought about T'Chaka, that is T'Challa's father's character. I mean, I think in the film, we don't get as much as I would want. All right. So what does that mean? Well, what do I want? Well, partly what I'd want is why was Wakanda continued to be so isolated from the rest of the world? Like, what was the thinking? T'Challa decides to break away from this. Killmonger decides to break first. We never really get inside the head of T'Chaka in terms of why, in the movie, about why he decided to go this path. And so I again, part of me is just sort of, I want more. I did like when T'Challa enters the Dreamlands and sees his father and sees all the other Black Panthers, some of which were women. You have to look carefully. They're in the background. Unfortunately, they should be more surface, but they're all there, and it really does create the sense of a royal lineage of people who've been given this tremendous mantle of power, and with it, of course, a tremendous amount of responsibility, keeping this amazing country intact in its own way. But I guess the politics guy in me sort of wants to know more about how these folks all thought about ruling. And we don't really get too much. We get a little bit about how it's very hard to be a good ruler and a good person. That's very Machiavellian, and I think the movie plays that out truthfully. I mean, I left the movie loving the Black Panther character, but he doesn't, he's flawed very much. The movie doesn't shy away from him being flawed. That's a staple of Marvel. But I feel that that ending with Killmonger, no one sort of walks away from there with a swelling score in the background. It was not only a bloody fight, but it was a fight of ideas, and I don't think T'Challa comes away from it completely unscathed in terms of his own standing. So I'd like to see more about theories of rulership. I'm going to go to a few more questions here. Adam asked me a specific plot question, perhaps philosophically. Why would Killmonger destroy the Blossoms' source of superpowers, and that's short-sighted? What if he had a son? So this is, I think, a great example of. I don't. That's a really good question. One wonders whether Killmonger. I guess I didn't entirely see what the end game for Killmonger was, which made it interesting, but which also invited further reflection. Like, is the end game all-out global war, and sort of in which case maybe there's no sense of a next generation that's really interesting to Killmonger whatsoever. part of it may have just been short-sightedness. You know, I mean, it's a classic move in some ways. Like, I'm going to make sure that there can be no one to challenge me, but that comes at a cost. There's also that no one can replace me, even if I want that person to replace me. You know, in general, I'm sort of curious. I mean, I don't think it was wrong that the movie didn't do this, but one thing that I was wondering about when watching this movie is it's so clearly embedded in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that I would have liked some thought from Killmonger about what his expectations were with his plan in light of a world that has the Avengers in it. Maybe the Avengers would have been divided and how they would have responded to a Killmonger reign in which many people were given weapons and were asked to rise up. I can imagine the Avengers perhaps being divided on that as they've been divided on other things, but they also hold a lot of power. They've also shown that they can fight back with an entire alien invasion. And obviously Killmonger knows that they exist and that they have a tremendous amount of power. So I would have liked to have known also what his plan was in dealing with those Avengers, and surely there would have been some who would have, if Black Panther couldn't have, who would have challenged him. What do you do if the Hulk drops into Wakanda? We may see some of this in a different capacity with the upcoming movie. Obviously, Wakanda is featured prominently in the upcoming Avengers movie. But anyhow, this is sort of me saying I don't know exactly what entirely Killmonger's endgame was. He had a plan, but we didn't see several steps along the way. So I would have liked to have heard more. So I have a question here from Aaron. What would you say is Black Panther's philosophy or philosophies, as well as Ross and Nakia and Claw and Killmonger? That's a huge question, and I don't know if I've been given enough to know their philosophies. I'll say a few of these things. To me, I'll use this first of all as an opportunity to say how much I loved the character of Nakia, and I like the fact that she pushes back on T'Challa right from the beginning. You know, he comes in, she's like, I was doing something, I was doing important work here, and at the end, he tells her, I want you here, and she's like, okay, we'll talk about it, but my work is very important, and I think that she's a wonderful and important character for that reason. I don't think we have yet for the Black Panther a worked out philosophy, which I'm happy about. And I'm happy about it because it'd be weird. He's just become king, and he's just had to face his first conflict, the first challenge to the throne. Interestingly, in the MCU, this is all very fast. He's with his father. His father is killed. He spends most of Civil War trying to find down who he presumes are the people responsible. We end that movie with him taking in Bucky, obviously. Now he has a challenge to the throne. So I think that what's interesting about this character is we're just beginning to see what his philosophy is. I think it has to do with being an inspiration, showing the world a peaceful means of technological power. But he's standing in front of the UN at the very end. If you went through all the credits, which of course, if you're a Marvel fan, you sat through all the credits, and he's standing there. He's standing before the UN, and people are skeptical. What do you have to offer us? You see this look on his face, and I don't exactly know what's behind that look, and I like that I don't know exactly what's behind that look. And so I hope that in the ensuing movies, both the ensemble pieces, but also in the no doubt future Black Panther movies, that we get a little bit more from this character about what his ruling philosophy is. And to bring it back to something I mentioned before, I want part of that to be whether he thinks he should be ruler. I imagine this character at some point has some serious thoughts about whether a monarchy is the best way to maintain Wakanda and to represent the world. I mean, I throw that out there only because Ta-Nehisi Coates explores this over the course of a year in his comic books. And of course, as an aside, as many of you know, Black Panther, when he first came on the scene, him being a ruler was pretty much downplayed. It was the wonderful Christopher Priest run that really surfaced the fact, well, this guy is king, and that matters. And so if you are interested in the comics and haven't looked at the Christopher Priest run either, that's certainly one to take a look at. All right, so Farfalla Designer says, Professor, what do you think about the blend of history and technology? What do you think about a quote from Mankind beginning in Africa, and therefore we are one? It's a nice quote. It's inspirational. People are throwing this term around, the Afrofuturism of this movie and envisioning this wonderful culture with these futuristic angles on it. I haven't thought about this enough, to be perfectly honest with you. It's a really good question. I am always curious to see what people think, fictionally speaking, the introduction of technology will do and the use of technology would do. You know, Wakanda has this cosmic event. Here comes the vibranium. They build a culture around it. They use it in massively inventive and interesting ways. They use it to protect themselves from the world. So they adopt a protectionist strategy with it. And so I'm getting here because this question of we are all one is challenged within the movie itself. As T'Challa says, you know, I want to, you know, sort of open up to the world. And, you know, his friend says, yeah, but then the world's problems become our problems. And I prefer our problems to be our problems and no one else's problems. And so I don't think it was explored as much as it could have been because we had 2 hours. But we had this back and forth between a more global perspective and a more protectionist perspective surfaced in this movie. It's another line of thought, and here I just think we don't know. I can imagine a sequel to Black Panther where Wakanda has been open to the world, and Wakandans are very upset at that. They feel that somehow their culture and their accomplishments have been undermined by its global presence. I could see another version of it where they're celebrated globally as an ideal that should be held up about the way that you run society. This is one of those areas where I'm thrilled to learn more. All right, so I am going to see here. This is from Aaron. How do you think that Marvel can incorporate philosophy to make more dynamic heroes and villains? I think part of it is just to... I hope they continue to do what they do, in that they give themselves the space in their storytelling to look at these issues and not rush over them. I mean, I'm thrilled that they decided to tackle this with Black Panther. I'll be disappointed if they don't continue to do so. I think that the Netflix format or just the television format is another great space to let these things breathe and move out. I think it'd be a disaster from a writing standpoint to just sit down with a script and say, I want to do philosophy of mind and I'm going to write a script around that. I mean, you could do that, but it's probably going to be lame. I think a better sort of approach is to tell an interesting story and then to look at that story and say, what interesting themes are here? Now maybe I can surface them a little bit better. Marvel, to me, has been unafraid in some of its storytelling to push us into some interesting spaces to think about. And I just hope that they give themselves room to do more. And I'll explain, you know, so I don't talk completely generally about this. Logan, to me, is a great example of this. You know, Logan, you know, has the courage to show us superheroes who no longer look superheroic at all. I mean, they're sick, they're elderly, they're good people, and they're important people, but they're not at their prime. This movie is not a movie in which they're, you know, fighting off alien invasions. The battles are hard, and no one feels particularly great after them. And that just gives you an arena in which to think about aging, in which to think about illness, in which to think about what it is to be here, what it is to have the next generation. So I think, to me, what I just, you know, invite Marvel to do is, you know, continue to have the courage to go into these places. And if you need to do your tentpole movies like, you know, parts 1 and 2 of the Infinity War, that's fine too, because we're all excited to see a gazillion superheroes come together and just, you know, beat up Thanos and have Thanos beat up them as well. All right, this is going to be, for now, the last question. Do you think that the positive effects, the positive sort of Panther effect, will lead to new diverse heroes sought and championed? Oh my goodness, I sure hope so. You know, I hope, I feel, you know, I feel, two, I hope that we're at a tipping point here. You know, to me, and I'm hopefully going to be putting together a book on this, you know, in the next 6 months to a year. Superheroes are emerging as a global narrative, and people from across, it used to be obviously very much just an American thing. Now it's becoming much more global. And one of the things that I think is great about that is, you know, different peoples, different cultures are making it their own. And that's what's great about the superheroes world, is that you can do that. You know, it's all accommodating in a sense. There's no losses in sort of expanding it. And so I certainly hope that the Panther effect includes. I'll give you very practical answers. I certainly hope that, amongst other things, the Panther effect includes Storm having her own movie. I certainly hope that the Panther effect includes, I'm sticking with Marvel, Ms. Marvel having, I think Ms. Marvel I'd like to have like a Netflix series just to see that wonderful character developed over with some time to breathe. I hope on the DC side of things, I've been waiting for Vixen. I know that Vixen is in a variety, you know, there's an animated series, and then there's of course the Legends of Tomorrow, but I've sort of wanted Vixen to be front and center too. There is already a lot of interesting superheroes that can be used for some fantastic storytelling, and there's room for more as well. And we're going to be getting at the end of this year, if I'm right, the Miles Morales Spider-Man. It's going to be an animated movie. We're going to be getting that. And from that first trailer, I mean, it's a short trailer. It's just meant to sort of whet the appetite, but that looks pretty exciting. That looks pretty good. I'm a big Spider-Man fan, and I can't wait to see the Morales version of Spider-Man, who's been in the Ultimate Spider-Man for so long. So, generally speaking, I'm optimistic, and I don't think that's a misplaced optimism. I mean, at the end of the day, and I get this, you know, it's for Hollywood, for instance, it's about the money, you know, and if anything, they see dollar signs. You know, they saw dollar signs with Wonder Woman. They see dollar signs with Black Panther. So if nothing else, that should motivate them. I will also just say that I've been recently watching the Black Lightning television show. I'm loving it. You know, I think it's perfect in that, you know, I know it's not exactly in the same world as The Flash and Arrow and so forth, but thematically it fits a little bit with them, but it also is its own thing. And I hope that continues on too. I'm loving Black Lightning. Great music going on there as well. So I hope we see more of this. I think it's a time to be optimistic about this sort of thing. So I'm going to close this up now, but I would just say that I hope this is just the beginning of the conversation for everyone. And I also want to just use this opportunity for those of you watching to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy lives to learn some philosophy with me and with superheroes. I hope my passion for it has come across. And I just hope you keep engaging these narratives and thinking about them philosophically. And thanks again for being a part of the course. Thanks.